excited to have everybody here today. It's starting to feel like old home week, you know? Third year, it's great. I'm Kelly Woodlock, and on behalf of the Ounce of Prevention Fund, we welcome you to the 8th National Summit on Quality and Home Visiting Programs. We're so excited to have you here and really look forward to our time together. We have people from all over, so we'll get into that in just a minute. We want to give a special thank you this morning to our funders at the Heising Simons Foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the Pritzker Children's Initiative. Without you, this would not be possible, so thank you very much. Okay, so over the next 2 days, we have such an amazing lineup, and it'll give you all an opportunity to share with your peers and engage from folks across the country and the world, to broaden our scopes, our horizons, and to grow together. So get ready, it's an amazing 2 days ahead. This year's summit features 29 workshop sessions and 4 plenary sessions. Hopefully some of you were able to make it to the poster reception last night. Who was able to come? All right, it's a good time. All right, and we had amazing posters, so I'm glad everybody took advantage of that. How many of you went to the communities of practice yesterday? Great. Lots of community learning and sharing there, so I'm glad you were able to make that as well. I'd like to put our steering committee members on the spot for just a second and to have them stand up and give them a round of applause. The steering committee does a lot of work to help us plan. Thank you. And I just want to give them all a personal thank you for the time and energy they put into the summit each year as we plan. We want to also thank the 130 plus speakers that we have this year who are taking time from their work to come and share their knowledge with us. So thank you for that. And then last but not least, I'd like to thank our planning team who makes this possible. So that would be Nick Parrish, Lexi Donaldson, and Chandra Ewell. So if you could give them a round. They're working tirelessly year-round to make this happen. Oops, sorry, I think I'm ahead of my time. Hold on. There we go. This year is a record breaker. We have 730 attendees, and as I mentioned, a good round of speakers with us this year. We also, as a new feature this year, we are live streaming all 4 plenary sessions. This is new and exciting, and it opens our audience up to 650 additional attendees to be able to engage and watch the plenary sessions from wherever they are. So including that, we're engaging and making a mark with about 1,300 people this year. So that is new and exciting for us. We have 47 states represented, Washington, D.C., Guam, and over 4 countries across the world. So we're very excited about that. All right, now I can flip. How many of you have downloaded the app? A fair number. You're going to want to do this if you haven't, and here is why. We want to make sure that you have access to the app that will allow you to look at your personal agenda, text and connect with one another, chat with the other attendees. It's really important. We will look for survey information on there, so after each session, please complete your surveys. There's a lot of reasons to download the app. It'll make it a lot easier for you to navigate over the next 2 days. In fact, our plenary session this morning, I think, will be using the app, so get ready. If you haven't downloaded it, we have instructions here that will help you to do that. If you need help, we have a person who's specifically really invested in the app at our registration table, so please see her. Her name is Catherine. All right. We did our best this year to make sure that you're comfortable and engaged with other attendees and with the sessions. If you find that you need to change a session, you can do that on the app as well, and we would encourage you to do that. You can see which sessions are full or which ones have room. So please take a look if you need to make a switch, and please let us know if you need help with anything. Look for any of the conference staff. They have a red stripe across their badge. Look for them. They will be glad to help you with anything that you need. All right. Let's to that in just a second. If you had dietary restrictions or indicated that when you registered, you will find you have a green card on the back of your name tag. This needs to be displayed at lunch today during the plated lunch session so that we can ensure that you get the dietary needs and meals that you need. So please make sure that is out on the table. If you didn't get a green card and you need one, please go to the registration desk and we'll help you with that. We are going to have our lunch today at noon, and we'll meet here. And then afterward, we'll begin with our first set of sessions. All right. Here we go. We're going to do something just a little different this year. You may have noticed you didn't get a gift when you came in and registered. We're going to give you the opportunity to gift back. So this year, instead of handing out a bag or a water bottle, we're partnering with Clean the World to construct hygiene kits for the local DC area, for the homeless in DC. So we would encourage you over your breaks or lunch or after sessions to go to the Wilson Room and assemble a kit. Each person has the opportunity to put together 1 to 2 kits. And we have about 1,100 to assemble, so we'll look forward to your partnership on getting this done. And then those will be distributed after the summit. Great. Okay. So a couple quick things about the app. You'll notice just a few things I forgot to mention, but you'll notice as you're in your sessions, you may see some new features that we're trying out this year. I mentioned that the plenary will have some of the app features. One will be question and answer. So you'll be able to ask questions from your seat instead of moving to a mic, or you can still do that, but instead of moving to a mic, you'll be able to ask your questions, and then we'll incorporate those into the workshops or into the plenary sessions. You'll also see some live polling happening this year. So please get engaged with that. When the polls pop up, you'll be able to respond to those, and it's just another way to engage throughout the session. So we're looking forward to that. All right, I think that's all of my 3 pages of notes. I'm going to introduce our president, Diana Rauner. Diana is the president of the Ounce of Prevention Fund, a public-private partnership that advocates for and provides highest quality care and education for children from birth to age 5, actually prenatal. Let me get that in there, prenatal to age 5. Prior to joining the Ounce in 2007, Diana was a senior researcher at Chapin Hall Center for Children, and she is also the co-chair of our state's home visiting task force since 2008. So welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you particularly for shepherding and stewarding this summit, which we are very proud at the Ounce to have shepherded for the last 3 years, and thank you very much for all of your leadership in that. And good morning. This is always such an exciting time for us at the Ounce. This is, as you know, a year-long process involving the steering committee and so many of you who help us develop an agenda. And every year I look at the agenda and I think, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. There's so many different sessions to go to. And we are so grateful that we've had increasing numbers of submissions for sessions and for the poster session. And the amount of energy and enthusiasm in our field is really evident in the fact that we can only accept, I think, about 30% of our submissions, which is pretty amazing. But I think, it's worth reflecting a little bit on where we were a year ago. A year ago, we were all on pins and needles hoping for MCV reauthorization. We've got that done, and in no small part, thanks to the advocacy and efforts of so many of you. So let's just take a minute to just breathe and congratulate ourselves on that. And I think one of the exciting things yesterday in the communities of practice is just the level of enthusiasm and engagement in policy and advocacy. Yes, we have 5 years of reauthorization on MCV, and also now we have increasing investments in states across the country and an increasing focus on the opportunities to connect home visiting with with child welfare, with early intervention, with early education. So many of the things that we have been talking about here over the last few years and which we'll be exploring further today. So it's a dynamic and exciting time to be in this field. We are so thrilled to have the largest attendee, the largest summit ever, and so excited that we're able to extend this summit out to people all over the country, and I guess maybe even all over the world through the live streaming. This is really an indication of the amount of energy and opportunity and promise of our field, and so congratulations to all of us for that. That's really great. So as part of the excitement and enthusiasm in our field, we have been thinking about how to weave together this field, how to grow and learn together, not just in these 3 days, but throughout the year. And as part of that, we've been exploring what it means to weave together our work. So you'll see, I have this little, what color was this? Orange, pink, little sticker on my name tag, and you can get one too if you want to, because it's a weaver. It says I'm a network weaver, and the truth is we're all network weavers here. So we are going to think today about how do we start to weave our work together, and you'll be hearing a lot about this over the coming couple of days. But we're going to kick it off this morning with a plenary session on network weaving, and I think that we should all first of all acknowledge that home visiting as a field has a lot to learn from the rest of the world and other social change efforts. And that's why it's exciting to introduce today's moderator, the network expert Marty Kooistra. Marty is the executive director of the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle-King County, which is a 170-member association focused on affordable housing. And if you're wondering what housing has to do with home visiting, maybe you need to stop in and talk about the home visiting for homeless families, which we all know is a really important issue. So Marty is going to be the moderator of our opening plenary, the new network leader, how you can grow your impact. And Marty will be joined by Constance Gully, the president and CEO of Parents as Teachers National Center. Oh, I think you guys should come on up while I'm talking. Sorry. Melissa Kelly, who is the network facilitator for the National Home Visiting Network. Crystal Munoz, the founder and executive director of Roots Family Center in Denver. And Lenore Scott, administrator of the Office of Early Childhood Services at the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. So this is going to be an interesting and different kind of session. We're going to talk not about specifically about home visiting. We're going to talk about the principles of network leadership that have the power to expand all of our reach and impact. And then we're going to hear from these home visiting leaders about the work that they do at their state, local, and in Constance's case, national level to think about network weaving. So with that, welcome, Marty.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Diana, for your leadership, and it's great to see all of you here. If you're excited to be here today, say yes. Yes. If you know that you are in a room full of very special people, say I am. I am. And let me know if you intend today to build 5 new relationships, say I will. I will. Wonderful, and thank you for that. You know what? Let's go ahead and bring up our first poll. All of you should be now into your apps, and we have a poll that we want you to take right now, which gets at this question of whether or not you know what the biggest challenge is in building collaborations and networks. So, folks in the back, if you have the poll, yeah, here we go. All right, and here are the results so far. We believe that the time necessary to build meaningful relationships, to have successful collaborations, is probably one of the greatest challenges we face in this particular crowd. A little bit of other things going on there, but we will come back and look at this throughout the day and the rest of the time that we're together. So, cool, thank you. All right, it's still building. Now you can see how well this works. There's also in the app a little worksheet that you can use to take notes on if you want to, or just know that the presentation that we have up here is also in the app, and so you don't need to worry about trying to connect with everything that we're saying, because we'll go through these slides in a very rapid fashion. Let me just tell you quickly, and I know you're now busy looking at your apps, who I am and why I'm here. I started my journey on this many years ago. I spent 24 years of my life working for Habitat for Humanity, and I was fortunate in 2004 to spend a little time at the Kennedy School of Government and the Harvard Business School doing a fellowship, and there I met a person by the name of Jane Waskillern. And Jane and I have been working together since that time, spreading what we believe are some key principles for how we can grow our organizations and our impact without necessarily thinking only about what does it take in terms of structure and how do we look only at organization. And so I want to spend a little time sharing that with you. It's all based on research, and what we have available for people to see is on a website called newnetworkleader.org, which will show up at the end. So here we go. This is our space, right? Deep poverty is an ecosystem where bad individual decisions occur within broken environments where the social glue has come unstuck. Let's not get lost in the debate about how we feel about those two statements. In fact, in this country, I believe 51% of us believe people are struggling and dealing with issues because of their behavior, and 49% because of the environment, and I may have those numbers turned around. But one of the reasons why we're so challenged is because we have a society that hasn't fully embraced and understood what poverty is about. But the real point here is that deep poverty has no single or most important cause. Plucking at one or another will not simply do. This comes from Matt Desmond's book, Evicted. Some of you may have read it or heard about it. Scientists tend to talk about things in terms of wicked problems, and wicked problems are difficult to define. Tangled root causes involve stakeholders with diverse values, interests, constantly evolving, no obvious answers or measures of success. Does this at any point in time relate to your work? Do you feel this? Yeah, some of you are nodding. I can see you out there. So we know that complex collaborations offer a robust response to wicked problems, but we also know that collaboration is an unnatural act between unconsenting adults. Right? Yeah. So complex collaborations can take on many forms. Collective impact, aligned action, you know all the terms, and we tend to relate to these terms, but we also believe in a concept called networks. And how do we see networks being different than collective impact? It really boils down to the focus in collective impact on structures, systems, and things of that nature, whereas looking at the network side of things, we're really focusing on bottom-up relationships. It's spending and investing the time, and this relates back to our poll, right? We tend to move into the realm of collaboration without dedicating the necessary time to those kinds of resources. All right, and so here we have the second poll up. There's 4 principles that Diana had mentioned earlier. And we see that the 2 that resonate most with you are the mission, not organization, and trust, not control. So we'll tell you a little bit more about what these principles are now. All right, 3 observations first. These are the things we know. Growth is hard. For nonprofits and NGOs, achieving scale and sustainability need to meet their mission is extremely challenging, okay? Can we all relate to this? Second, size doesn't matter. For even large NGOs, they're dwarfed by the scale of the problems they seek to address. I was fortunate to travel around the country and even around the globe talking about Habitat for Humanity when I was deeply involved in it. And I could get in front of a crowd like this and woo them and say, did you know, every 6 minutes, somewhere around the world, Habitat for Humanity is starting a new home. And people were like, wow, I had no idea. We're only 96,000 houses a day short. Okay? And so coming to grips with that reality and being vulnerable about how well we are able to achieve what we're trying to do is important. And finally, when we only look at things from organizational success and performance, we tend to miss the mark in terms of really evaluating, are we moving the needle on what we're really trying to change? So networks work when the goal is to mobilize organizations and resources together, not when the goal is to become the leading organization first, engaging in collaboration at the margins. And we spend a lot of time working with funders to really get a grip on this, because the funding community owns some of the responsibility here in terms of how it drives collaborations. We need a different leadership mindset in order to make this work, and a different set of metrics. And we know that the network has to be seen as the vehicle for change, not the organization itself. And so here we go. 4 key principles: mission, not organization; node, not hub; humility, not brand; trust, not control. In this first one, leaders adopt strategies and tactics to achieve a mission, not necessarily to stimulate organizational growth. I get a lot of questions with this when we say not. It's intended to be a little bit provocative. We know that our organizations need to be strong. We need to do capacity building. We need that foundation. But we don't want to get lost in that space. Node, not hub. Well, simply look at this graphical image here. Those of you who are in social work, this is a form of an eco map. Don't get lost in the detail. The only point here is that when we think about ourselves from the realm of service delivery, we tend to end up with our organization becoming the common interest rather than the thing that we're trying to solve. And so how do you make sure that your organization is actually part of that ecosystem as a node rather than the hub? Does any of this resonate with any of you? Yeah. Humility, not brand. Organizations work alongside their peers as equals and willing to take a back seat when their partners are in a better position to lead. And here's probably the most important one. Trust and shared values are far more important than formal control mechanisms, such as contracts and accountability systems. Robert Porter Lynch, who used to work with the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, taught me years ago. He said, Marty, the reason we construct MOUs is to know how to get out of a relationship, not how to make one work. Yeah. Strategy and structure matter. The most important factor behind any successful collaboration is that trust-based relationship. Jane Wayskiller, who I work with, has said this, and this is the thing that we continue to see in the case studies that we deliver. So quickly, 5 C's. How do we make them work? First, we clarify the purpose. Be very clear about what we're trying to accomplish. Convene the right people. Bring them into the circle. Focus on what we're doing. And then we get into the trust-building work. And this is not trust for acceptance, trust for agreement, certainly not trust for affection. We're talking about trust for accomplishment. How do we draw ourselves back to that purpose? Coordinate existing actions. And this is essentially what you're experiencing today, and what many of you are part of is being a learning network. How do we share promising practices, data, information? How do we begin to hear from each other about things that are working? What we're trying to do now is ask you all to go deeper and to build an impact network, to really focus on things that we can do to co-create, things that we can do to leverage our skills and competencies across the areas. And ultimately, how do we build connections to other sectors? It was mentioned earlier by Diana about housing. I think we all know there's a direct correlation there. How do we work across sectors to make sure that we're really having high impact? So that's, in a nutshell, what we want to talk about. But most importantly, we're blessed today to have 3 great panelists. We're going to hit this from a local, state, and national perspective. You'll hear from them each for a few minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. We'll see how much time is left. You can ask your questions in the app. I have some canned questions as well, and then we'll do a wrap-up. So thank you all for your attentiveness, and please welcome our first panelist. Krista. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your expertise and sharing all of your information around network leaders. Network leaders is something that I'm super passionate about, so I'm really grateful to be here today. My name is Crystal Munoz, and I'm the founder and executive director of Roots Family Center. We're a nonprofit organization. We're doing home visitation programs, parents as teachers and hippie, in Southwest Denver, and we primarily work with Spanish-speaking families. So as a founder of a new nonprofit, we are really trying to figure out how to implement all of these principles into being network leaders in our community. The first that Marty mentioned was mission, not organization. We all, as nonprofits, have our mission. We are very passionate about our mission statement, and we are really love what we do. But in general, we are there to support families. We connect with people who are supporting families, and we want to connect with the families with the resources that they need, how they want to receive the support that they need. So that seems easy to me, right? We're all in it to support families. The second is node, not hub. Well, we are a small nonprofit, and we are pretty naive to think that we might be everything for every person in our community. So we have to count on other people who are working in our community to offer those resources. So really what I wanted to talk about most is trust and humility. And how do those two principles really come together at our local center? And what are the key things that really make us different and unique, and how those relationships are just really robust in our community. So I think about 3 different areas in which we've been able to really create strong partnerships. And one is with some of the schools, not all of them, because we know that not everybody's ready to embrace these principles, right? We know that there are some that are working kind of in a different area, and we have to have patience to bring everyone along. We also have worked with mental health services, and we have also worked with our partner organizations. And so what are some of the ways that we've really been able to create that trust and humility? And I was thinking about when we have our events, right? So we have events, our partner organizations have events, we support one another, but what does that look like? We have these big words of support and refer and provide resources for, but honestly, in a local level, what does that look like? So it looks like attending the events, obviously, right? Being a part of back to school nights and open houses and being present, but also truly being present. So truly helping with cleanup, helping with setup, helping provide resources, being there, being present, and at all levels. So when we talk about building trust, we don't talk about going to the leaders. Just the leaders have a great relationship, and now our organizations are trusting organizations. No, it means meeting people where they are. So every level. That means our parents, our children, our constituents, our home visitors, our leadership, our board, everybody is interacting in a way that we are able to build that trust and pick each other up. So really understanding that humility is celebrating other people's successes even when you don't recognize it as your own. And so being able to share those events on our Facebook pages and being able to really pick people up and congratulate others for the work that they're doing, because at the end of the day, we're all accomplishing the mission together. We're all supporting families. And so when I think about those home visitation home visitors and how they're connecting to our community, it's really important that we're all doing that on all different levels to create that trust and bond with other organizations and other people doing similar work. How many of you are doing home visits or are working in a home visitation model that actually serves families? Yeah. So would you believe that it takes time to build the trust with families? It builds time to build the trust with organizations. And relationships is really about one-on-one interactions. And so we all know that it takes time, and as the poll showed, we all knew that's what really takes time. But that's also what makes the organization be able to grow and really accomplish the mission. And picking each other up and being humble to say when you don't know how to do something, and have others support you, supporting others and asking for support. So I just was thinking about one of our community members. He's one of our community leaders, and he said, oh, you know what? I really wanted to do this summer camp for our kids this year. And I said, great, tell me about it. What are you going to do? And he said, no, ¿qué vamos a hacer? What are we going to do? And so that just reminds me that we are in it for the community. We have a common mission, and we should be supporting each other. So as I end today, I just wanted to remind you of this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Crystal, for a very passionate speak. I feel sort of humbled to be following behind that. Okay. So I'm going to talk about this collaboration from a state perspective, right? And so when we're thinking about everything that Crystal talked about, building relationships, right? It's not any different. We need to think about having a shared vision. And for us in New Jersey, that started in 2002, right? So when I'm thinking about Crystal and she's saying it takes time, again, we have to take that into consideration. It's a slow process. When we want to think about the things that we're doing in New Jersey, and I think I need to step back and preface that we have home visitation in our state. We have 3 home visiting models, healthy families, parents as teachers, and nurse-family partnership. And so when you think about each of those models individually, right, they come with their own host of implementation challenges, and we're working together in our state in a collaborative process, in a uniform process. I'm looking at my state colleagues over at the table. Hi, New Jersey. Thank you for the support. So they're here to keep me honest, right? They're here to keep me honest about this whole collaborative work that I think sometimes when we think about the end game where we are, we're all in it together. How do we keep our families connected? How do we keep them safe? And how do we keep them moving forward and being self-sustaining, right? In order to do that, we have to think about what do we want. Like when we started, we had an end game in place, right? That was our end game. And so when we all came together, we brought together a variety of organizations, juvenile justice, we brought together our perinatal and folks, our maternal and child health folks, we brought together our home visiting, our child protection, we brought together a variety of state agencies, as well as our local community partners as well. Again, thinking about we have a diverse state, we have 21 counties, work looks different in all 21 counties, but how do we build that infrastructure? How do we build it on a state level? How do we build it on a local level? What are the needs that we need to put in place? What are the tools that we need to ensure that we have together? How do we increase the availability? And what will our capacity look like? And do we have enough as we stand today? And so I think when we started at work in 2002, those were some of the questions that we asked ourselves. And as we started to build together the system, we continually come together, we continually look at where are we, we continue to assess, do we have enough, and we continue to assess what do we need next to continue to service our families. I love to show this graphic because I really think it gives a picture of the time it took for us to build our system, for the time it took for us to really come together and bringing together what we have at this point in time. When we started in 1995, we had 1 home visiting model in only 19 cities, not necessarily 21 counties. And so when we look today, 2018, we have 3 home visiting models in all 21 counties of our state. But again, if we look at our timeline, we'll see that it happened in chunks. And so also thinking about our central intake system, how do we get here? Again, some people look at us for advice. Some people look at us to figure out how do we create the system? And I think this timeline really gives you the idea that it happened over time. We had to develop relationships. We had to build trust. We had to test. We had to track and adjust. And so when we started in 2002, we tested in 2 communities, not even the whole county. And then as we started to, pull together different funding, we were able to sort of build. As we started to bring in partners, they sort of informed us at the state level. How does this work? What do we need to make this work? Sometimes we come with a bright idea, and we'll have our folks say, that's not going to work. And then they'll give us the reasons why it's not going to work, and then we'll have to say, oh my God, you're absolutely right. And so when we think about it, it's not a top-down, that when we're doing this work, we all have to come together. Everyone who's doing this work, we're visionaries. We care about our families. We care about our communities. And we know, and sometimes, as Crystal was alluding to earlier, we have to go to the people who live there, who work there, in order to get the right answers. So what are some of the things that we needed to think about this? And again, a lot of you work in nonprofits. Funding. It's always a challenge. And it's no different at the state level. So as we started to put together this work, we had to really figure out, well, I work for the Department of Children and Families. This is what we can contribute. Department of Health, how much do you have and how much can you give? And so as we were building this system, we also had to work collaboratively in funding the system. And also with that, we really had to look at ourselves as state partners. What do we do? Who can do what best? And I think when we're thinking about those principles, how do we take our ego, right, out of it and really think about the roles? Who can do what better? And then really sit in that, because it's really about our families. And so when we think about it, we had to sort of, looking at the 4 departments, really determine who should be the lead, who should maybe co-fund, and who should sort of implement this. And we sort of came to that decision by really assessing our strengths as state organizations, strength as state partners, and our strengths as state leaders, but really keeping the focus of the families in mind. So as we're thinking about this system building, right, this is happening over time, how do we really help families get connected to these services, right? How do we help reach families earlier? If we're really thinking about our end game, having folks and families, children, safe, healthy, and connected, right? That's our end game. What do we need to do that? What's the system that we need to put in place to be able to create that? So a single point of entry, right? Rather than having folks coming from different avenues, let them come through one single point. That way we can track the families, we eliminate duplication, we're effectively using our resources, and then we're doing this at the local level, right? So it's a parallel process, thinking about a lot of what Crystal was saying, and here we are at the state level. So again, parallel process. And so recognizing, and I'm looking at my table over here, that's where the real work happens. And so how do we at the state support them to do that work? Communication. I think it begins and ends with communication, right? How do we listen, from the community? How do they listen to us? And then how do we collectively figure out what works? Thinking about the partnerships, again, parallel process. We have partnerships on the state level, but how do we help the partnership on the local level? So when they're doing this work, again, parallel, they're doing community hubs. They're bringing together all of the stakeholders. They're bringing together all of the folks who can effectively work with the families. Thinking about what Crystal was saying on the local level, right? So they're creating that same hub of folks to really think about the challenges, to really think about the successes, what's really working well, and then how do they bring that to the state level? So again, as state departments, again, not just one, we're collectively talking about 4 departments at this point in time, working together, thinking of, as we're working through our challenges, how do we support? What are some of the things that we can do? Because it all can't come from one department. And so as we're moving forward, as we're thinking about a point in time and where we are today, as we're tracking and adjusting, how do we expand that partnership? Who should be at the table? Who do we need to include? So right now, we're thinking about how do we bring the Department of Labor to the table, thinking about as we want our families to be safe, healthy, and connected, they also need to be working. They need to be able to sustain themselves. And at this point in time, we figured labor will be a great partner to bring. So at this point in time, I will turn it over. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Constance Gully, like the screen says. I am the president and CEO of Parents as Teachers National Center, but this morning I'm really representing the National Home Visiting Alliance. Is everyone familiar with the National Alliance of Home Visiting Models? Okay. I see some yeses, I see some, what is that? So I'm speaking from the perspective of what I'll often refer to as the Alliance, but it's a collaboration of 9 national early childhood home visiting program models motivated by a shared commitment to promoting effective use of home visiting as a mechanism to enhance the health and well-being of families, parents, and children. In other words, it is a group of gathered to collaborate. We are unconsenting adults trying to collaborate and do work together. We have a common vision to normalize evidence-based prenatal and early childhood home visiting programs to promote positive outcomes for all children and families. That resonates with the vision of many of the models individually as well. We have a collective mission to improve the health and well-being of pregnant women, young children, and their parents by elevating and advancing the field of evidence-based home visiting through collaborative leadership among unconsenting adults. So the key activities that we share, promising and best practices. We collaborate on public funding, public policy, and resources. We explore cross-model collaborations. We expand reach and connection of services to families. We work together to do that. We advocate for systems integration. We serve as a resource to other home visiting organizations. Among additional activities, we identify cross-model issues that affect outcomes of interest for each model. We also look at innovations to improve service, legislative and local advocacy. While each of our individual home visiting models is unique in intervention, goals, and outcomes, aspects of federal, state, and local mechanisms of home visiting implementation pertain to all. At the local level, at the state level, we heard from Crystal and Lenore, the network principles apply at every level, and we have to do this work together. The Alliance started with 6 models in the beginning. We expanded to about 8 models and then later 10. We experienced one model that withdrew from the Alliance basically after they determined they didn't have the capacity to fully engage at the time. The current members of the Home Visiting Alliance, the current 9 models include Child First, Family Connects, Early Head Start, HIPPY, NFP, Parents as Teachers, Parent-Child Home, and Safe Care. Those are just the current models connected to the Alliance. This is not a secret society. We support home visiting and families and children in communities. So members of what I'll often refer to as the Alliance, we've worked together on issue briefs, presentations on a range of home visiting topics, common across various models. We often collaborate right here at the summit. Many workshops over the past several years were not individual model focused, but focused on the work of home visiting, and the Alliance worked together to jointly present those. You can find many of those presentations on the Alliance website, nationalalliancehvmodels.org. One of the recent joint publications we issued is Lessons from the Field, Learning to Replicate and Take Quality Home Visiting to Scale. So those are just some examples of the work that we've done together as an alliance. I'm going to skip these and come back to them. We typically we convene in person about 3 times a year. We meet by a conference call in between. We usually try to connect at events like the summit or the all grantee meeting, or models, we rotate and individual models host those convenings. We're especially grateful to the Heising Simons Foundation, who has funded much of the work of the Alliance since its inception. We've also had the privilege of 2 stellar facilitators, both with decades of involvement in home visiting, Miriam Westheimer and Deb Darrow. So they've really helped make this collaborative effort easier because they've been around in home visiting. They understand, they're steeped in some models in particular, but they understand the work and the mission and the necessity of the work of the Alliance. So thank you for the vision. I believe this was an initial vision of Miriam in the beginning, and she reached out to Heising Simons, and here we are. In recent years, we've lifted up at every meeting at the opening. The small but mighty Miriam Westheimer has us reflect on the network principles. That's how we get it done. We look every time, mission, not organization, node, not hub, humility, not brand, trust, not control. And I think the poll was very indicative of the experience that we have. Mission, not organization, is a challenge because we all come together with our individual organizations, missions in mind, but we all have that common mission of supporting families and children and strengthening communities. And that's what we have to come back to. And if we don't, the small but mighty Miriam Westheimer will remind us why we're there. I mean, we're making complex collaborations. I think the work is challenging. We look at the work that has to be done. We clarify the purpose. We set the agenda before we convene, before we talk. We convene the right people. Model CEOs attend every meeting, or at a minimum, the portion of the meetings that are set aside for what I refer to as the Vegas sessions. So those are the sessions that are for CEOs only. So if we have something to fight about, that's where we do it. And what happens in those sessions, it stays in those sessions. And when we come out, I don't know about my fellow CEOs, but I don't have all the answers. I don't even have most of the answers. So the agenda is often driven by the broader attendance at every meeting. We include experts from the models in the research, the endorsement and accreditation areas, technical assistance and implementation support. The policy and advocacy folk are at the table. Professional development, we talk about data systems. We connect on the work. The work that we do as individual models is, because we don't have all the answers, it's all the more effective when we collaborate and talk with each other and try to grow together. It allows us to also cultivate trust. It's amazing how you can build trust over wine and good food. It works every time. We break bread together, we fellowship, and we have learned to love one another and respect the individual models and understand that we are stronger champions together. We coordinate our actions on a regular basis. We pounded the pavement on Hill visits. I'll show a nice photo about that later. But we've learned to collaborate for systems impact. I'll look at that photo one more time. I like this picture. So this is one of the meetings we hosted at the National Center of Parents as Teachers, and you can see from the photo the many models that are represented, but also you see Dr. Willis, who was at that time leading McVie efforts for HRSA. We have research staff, implementation support staff, and our great facilitators. And that was Prevent Child Abuse Month, so we all had our pinwheels handy, and we took advantage of the opportunity to message together. Parents as teachers. I like parents as teachers. It's a wonderful model. We do great work. My time is almost up. So this is more about why we do this. We're touching 188,000 families, 226,000 children. Okay, it sounds wonderful. It's not enough. This next slide looks at the footprint of zip codes, 8,221 zip codes. It sounds very nice. The National Evidence-Based Footprint from the 2018 Home Visiting Yearbook, this is a national footprint of all models that reported to the National Home Visiting Resource Center. We're still only touching about 53% of the counties in this country. 304,259 families received evidence-based home visiting in the 2018 program year. That sounds very good, but once again, it's not enough. And when we consider the need versus the provision, pregnant women and families that meet at least one of 5 targeted areas or targeted criteria, the unmet need is 99.7%. We're touching 0.3%, not of all families, but just of the families that could benefit most from home visiting. It may look a little bit better when you consider families that have two targeted criteria. We're touching 92%. Is that enough? Absolutely not. That's why the work of the National Home Visiting Models Alliance is so important, and why we have to become consenting adults in this effort. This is a nice photo of some of the work we did when we were pounding the pavement for McVee. This is Missouri Senator Roy Blunt, a wonderful champion for home visiting, and especially for parents as teachers. He's my senator, so I get to say that. Frank Didone from NFP, my friend who was sitting up front to encourage me, Stacy Kroom Rayleigh from Hippie, and Dan Duffy with Healthy Families America. We sat down and we figured out, okay, who's doing the Hill visits? All of our policy and advocacy staff, our contracted lobbyists, they led and guided this effort. They scheduled the meetings. We decided who would sit in on which sessions. That is how we do this. We had briefings with the law enforcement collaboratives on the Hill. We had briefings with all of the models sitting at the table. Thanks to these and other efforts, evidence-based home visiting is on the radar for additional funding in the states, as well as federal funding policy like CAPTA and Families First. We're getting it done together. We're all in this together. And the big thing that we have to consider is the impact that we're making. That is wonderful. The wicked problem is what we're really charged to solve, and flipping the numbers to where we're touching 99.7% of the families that can benefit from home visiting. So, thank you.
Thank you, panelists. That's great. So we have just a couple of minutes for some questions. I'm going to see if any have popped in here. All right, for Constance, regarding the slide on unmet need, can you share what are the risk factors used to define high priority families for home visiting?
Let's see, poverty, single moms, parents under the age of 21, those are 3. I should be able to name all 5, but I'm an accountant, so I remember the numbers more than I do the words. But if you have not flipped through the National Home Visiting Resource Center's yearbook, that's where the data came from. It was drawn right out of the slide. So it lists, there are actually 8 criteria, but those numbers are based on the top 5.
Great, thank you. And this is for all of you as panelists. I want to get at this question of leadership traits just for a second. What do you think, and I'm not asking you I want you to be comfortable in the space of humility, but what is it about your leadership style that you think has helped you do the work you've accomplished? Is there something about how you see the world, or what is your perspective, and how does that really help you do this work and be successful?
I'll start.
Yes.
I think it's being inclusive, right? Recognizing that you can't do this work alone. And if you really are a high achiever, right? If you want to be successful, you know that you need to hear from your peers, you need to hear from your coworkers, your colleagues, and we all know that it starts with a directive, but I think recognizing that this is truly a collective process. I think one of the things that helped us as a state, again, is to really listen to our partners, listen to our families, really go down to, we call them beneficiary voices, whatever you're listening towards, but really hearing from the folks and then really building from the bottom up.
I think it's a personality trait, definitely. I mean, I see great leadership that are very directive, but I also see great leaders who surround themselves by great people. And so I think when you recognize what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and you surround yourself by people who can support your weaknesses and be vulnerable, I think that is when the work really happens and the trust really gets built. So I definitely see that there are people who are easier to work with, right? Because they have that same kind of idea. But I really think it's a personality trait, and I think it's just being humbled every single day to know that you can't do everything and you don't know everything, and you should surround yourself by people who can lift you up and you can lift them up. So.
Anything you want to add to that, Constance?
I think they hit the nail on the head, but I think for the work of the Alliance, what has happened is as we've built relationships over time, we realize what each of us bring to the table, and some of it's the same, but the value is often in the differences.
Yeah, super. There's an audience question, somewhat related. How do you overcome issues of control and territoriality? Yes, territoriality. Any thoughts on that one?
I think it takes time. It takes time. I think at the local level, I mean, personally, we're coming in, Roots Family Center comes into a community that's already established. There's already a lot of great leadership going on. There's organizations doing amazing work, and really coming in, recognizing the strengths in what everybody else has to offer, and giving them their place and their value in time, reaching out to their resources, reaching out to their strengths, and building that trust a little bit at a time. Often we're forced to be territorial because of our funding, and so we have to find a way to come together to speak to funders about how we're doing a bigger impact if we were able to work together and not be so forced to work separately.
I also think it's acknowledging the elephant in the room sometimes, right? We come together, and I loved how you said the wickedness of it all. Let's just put it out there. Let's talk about it. And then thinking, how do we collectively come together? I think we have to acknowledge that it's hard. I think we have to acknowledge that it is going to get messy. And we have quite a few Vegas moments as well, right? Right? But I think in having those Vegas moments, that's how you create that safe space. So I think it's acknowledging the elephant, recognizing that it's not going to be easy, and acknowledging the fact that it's going to take time to get there, and be okay sitting in that.
Yeah. And early on, I used to think that you could suppress self-interest in a group, and it just doesn't work. You got to figure out how to use it as energy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So here's one more audience question. How have you been able to break down the silos and overcome the challenges of working with partners who have institutionalized bureaucracy? Are there any institutionalized bureaucrats in the room?
I won't raise my hand.
Yeah. Do you want to touch that one?
I mean, I think it's a reality. It's a reality that we live in. We know that sometimes we want things to happen quickly, and because of the bureaucracy, it doesn't happen that way. Yeah. But we don't give up. We just keep trying, and we just take the time that it takes to. If we're truly engaged and we're truly passionate about the end game, then we need to take that time, and we need to break down those barriers that are put in our way. I think sometimes when I think about nonprofits versus states versus nationals, sometimes nonprofits may think they have more liberty to do things as they want, and then working with the state entity, they might have less, and national maybe even less. And so knowing that it's going to take time to break down those things, and being consistent and not giving up.
I think, right, from a state's perspective, I think I can echo that. And I think one of the things that we're doing at this juncture, right, because again, thinking about our end game, is actually we're looking at policies, because sometimes I think that institution is just practice over time. And so now I think it's really looking at policy, looking at rules and regulations, and how much of that is real, right? And is that a real constraint? And how much of that is interpretation? So I think, it allows us, I think we have to be willing to do that work, right? Because it's hard work. And I think we have to respect the institution for what it is, because it has, it serves a purpose. But then how do we sort of work through that maze?
I think bureaucratic institutions respect collaboration more than they do self-interest. So oftentimes on a policy and from a policy and advocacy perspective, when models show up unilaterally, then they perceive that as a model war. But when we have a common narrative of advancing the work of home visiting at the federal level and in states, you can talk about the models, because we all bring different things to families and communities, but New Jersey is a great example of how communities and home visiting is more effective when there are multiple models applied in any given community, and we have to become, we had to get comfortable with that. So, but I think they were much, even Senator Blunt and others on the Hill were much more receptive when there were 4 models in front of them, or when there was a briefing with 7 or 8 models across a table.
Yeah, super. Yes, you mentioned the small and mighty Miriam. I think the first Zoom meeting I had with Miriam, she used the word model wars, and I was trying to figure out what I might be getting into here. Thank you. Let's give a quick hand to our panelists. All right. Melissa Kelly, would you please come up and tell us a little bit about what you are working on?
And I think this mic wasn't working, so I need to hold this one. Is this working?
You're good.
Okay. So I will actually try and go pretty fast here. That went too fast.
It's the best.
Okay. So home visiting stakeholders work hard to improve research, policy, and practice in ways that enhance outcomes for young children and their families. At times, success is compromised because efforts are disconnected. A little over a year ago, there was a home visiting field building retreat where key stakeholders from a variety of perspectives, policymakers, academics, advocates, models, foundations, researchers, state and federal leaders, and local program staff conceived a collective vision to better connect the field. Out of that vision came an effort to create a national home visiting network to inspire the growth of a well-networked field that catalyzes and magnifies the collective reach and effectiveness of early childhood home visiting. So this concept of a national home visiting network is to create a means for connecting the field. We're not creating a new organization nor a hierarchical group. We are employing the network principles to catalyze collaboration across existing networks, organizations, and centers of activity within the home visiting field. This is an effort that is under development. It is guided by an advisory committee that is exploring how we move from sharing information across existing activities to linking, aligning, and leveraging our collective efforts. As an example, last week we pulled together a small group of thought leaders representing models, states, and local implementing agencies to begin a cross-pollinated conversation about the many challenging data issues that we all face. And also present were a few leaders from other home visiting initiatives and efforts that engage in major projects in this data space so that we could connect the conversations that we had at that meeting with the conversations that are happening at other levels around data issues. Another example of what we're working on right now is figuring out a way to map the connections of existing national home visiting organizations, networks, and major centers of activity to better understand how these existing efforts are connected and where we have opportunities for growth. So, everyone working in the home visiting field, we know, is engaged in collaborative work. We're seeking to build upon those efforts to inspire greater connectivity across the field. As Diana shared, throughout the summit, you will see people that are wearing these I'm a Network Weaver stickers. And we want you all to share your stories about how the network mindset has helped you to increase your impact. And we'll give you a sticker, and we'll give you one to pass along to someone else as you share your story and they share their stories. So in addition, you can find a brief overview of the National Home Visiting Network and where we are to date with that in the Summit app.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so in the Network Weaver science, there is a term called closing triangles, and it's essentially a simple principle that you know someone and you know someone else that you think should be connected to each other. Your job is to make them connected. And so we hope that throughout this experience, you are able to do a whole lot of that kind of work. I'm going to be available in the Burnham Latrobe room at these break times for those of you who are somewhat curious about what we're up to or how you might get some quick advice or thoughts or how I could learn from you. Because if you are doing some kind of great network work at the local level, we want to hear about that so that we can begin to catalog and share and express that as well. So please come and see me during those times. And now I ask all of you, what are the 4 principles? Mission, not organization. Node, not hub. Humility, not brand. And trust, not control. If you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten, okay? If you want to know more about what we're talking about, here is the website, and let me just close with these comments. First of all, you are a group of very wonderful and special people. You are standing in the gap in your communities in ways that most people probably do not realize. You're doing a lot of important work. We saw today, though, as it relates to the gap and the need, we have to do a whole lot more. And we have to figure out how to draw civil society into that space with you. Not own it, but share it. Be orchestra leaders. Develop strong systems and networks that take us there. The biologist E.O. Wilson has said, the real problem with humanity is that we have medieval institutions, Paleolithic emotions, and godlike technology. We even witnessed a little example of that technology today. I want to compel all of you in the next day and a half, 2 days that you're together to think about how do we change that notion of medieval institutions? How do we build the networks that are going to hit the mark in terms of reaching many more households? One more round of applause for our panel, and thank all of you.